Great Britain, once the ruler of the world, is today fighting for dear life. The country has fought political instability, housing crises, and back-to-back economic setbacks. This has been the case for years, but it seems that Britain has reached its very limit. With protests all across the country, a government that is ill-prepared to stand its ground, and an economy that is running into the ground. Experts have said that a complete collapse is nearby. But are things really that dismal in the kingdom? Let's check it out. Inflation hits Britain. The economic landscape in Britain is in serious trouble. Many have drawn comparisons to the troublesome 1970s, but it's crucial to know that the issues the United Kingdom faces today are unique. For one, the 1970s boasted higher growth rates and trade surpluses. On the flip side, the modern UK is wrestling with a deepening economic crisis. So the biggest worry on the horizon is the growing pressure of inflation. Take this, for example, the recent decision by the Bank of England to pause interest rate increases. This is a balancing act between taming inflation and safeguarding businesses. The Purchasing Managers' Index for the services sector has reached high levels. This has not been seen since the global financial crisis. And officials have also tried to pin the blame on the COVID-19 pandemic, but that's not the case. This is because such numbers were not seen even during the pandemic, when the economy had come to a total halt. Today, the economy grapples with many challenges, weakening job markets and consecutive rate hikes. The impact of the BOE's rate adjustments is still unfolding, but there is a bigger concern now. The UK might be headed toward a period of economic downturn. The housing crisis worsens. The housing market has wholly regressed into a crisis. This was last seen during the 2008 financial crisis, says the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, and many factors have contributed to this. High property prices, increasing mortgage rates, and a more stringent credit environment, and these are only a few. The Resolution Foundation has warned the Brits, with the recent increase in interest rates, people with mortgages will still face challenges. To renew one's mortgage in 2024, the yearly mortgage cost could go up by around £3,000 or even more on average. Torstein Bell, the head of the Resolution Foundation, has chimed in. She says there's going to be a lot of trouble with mortgages, and much of it will happen right before the 2024 election, so it looks like a tough time for people dealing with mortgage payments. Out of around 24 million households in England in 2020 and 2021, about 15.5 million were people who were in control, says the government's English Housing Survey. Among them, 35% owned their homes, while 30% were still paying off a mortgage. Approximately 600,000 fixed-rate mortgage deals were set to finish soon, says UK Finance, and the earliest timeline was in the second half of this year. On that note, 1.8 million are going to end in 2023. Last year, almost half, 45% of those choosing a fixed-rate deal only committed to it for 2 years. The weakening healthcare system. The National Health Service is the beating heart of the UK's healthcare system, but the heartbeat is dropping with each day. Throughout the country, there are mass strikes and protests. Consultants, senior doctors, and junior doctors are standing up together. Why? Because they're overwhelmed. They feel an enormous amount of pressure, and it's getting dangerous because there are not enough doctors and staff, not by a huge margin. Because the doctors feel overworked and underpaid, the quality of healthcare has suffered. There is a dire need for new equipment. This includes everything, from supplies to machinery, you name it. And while these resources are missing, there are also no funds to offer relief. Most importantly, instead of acknowledging their negligence, the government is playing defense. They have summed it up. The strikes are what's hindering the healthcare system. In a nutshell, they're pointing fingers instead of dealing with the real issue at hand. But here's the real worry. There are over 7 million people waiting for treatment in the NHS. 7 million! That's a staggering number. The strikes and the long waiting lists are making people question, is the NHS, the lifeline all Brits rely on, as strong and dependable as it should be? Growing energy concerns. The United Kingdom is grappling with a crisis on the energy front. This intertwines energy challenges and the looming ecosystem collapse. There are government policy shifts and unusually warm weather pushing winter back, but the energy crisis remains a pressing concern. Energy prices under the October cap are set to be 69% higher than in 2021, with an added burden on lower-income families due to a raised standing charge. National Energy Action warns that fuel poverty affects as many as 6.6 million households. This is a significant increase from 4.5 million in October 2021. The current situation reveals shortcomings in the UK's energy sector despite the government's measures, and the risk of excess winter deaths amounted to 4,706 last year. Several weaknesses in the energy system contribute to the crisis. Over 2 million people using prepayment meters lack smart meters, which is hindering energy-saving efforts and supporting accessibility. Customer service inadequacies further complicate matters, as individuals often struggle to understand available help, leading to unclaimed vouchers. The second major issue is a lack of action on home insulation, with rates 45% lower in 2022 than in 2021. Eligibility for energy support linked to Social Security benefits is also shabby, which leaves around 2.3 million households in the poorest fifth without payments, and no concrete steps that the government has taken. The standing charge structure affects the poor in a much worse way. Advocates, including Martin Lewis from Money Saving Expert, call for its elimination. This is because it discourages energy conservation and is regressive. At the same time, the UK faces an ecosystem crisis, particularly around its forests. A study led by Dr. Eleanor Chu, a forest expert, warns of a potential collapse within 50 years. This will be due to diseases, extreme weather, and wildfires. The impact of ash dieback disease was intense. Add to that the damage from winter storms in 2021, and this underscores the government's inadequate attention to these critical issues. Sure, the government's plan to plant 600,000 trees by 2025 is a positive step, but challenges such as water conflicts and a changing climate demand comprehensive solutions. The interconnectedness of these crises amplifies the risks, ranging from disturbed air quality to water scarcity and ecosystem destruction. Addressing these challenges requires urgent and coordinated efforts. The energy crisis necessitates policy revisions to support vulnerable households, and also to enhance energy-saving measures and remove regressive structures. At the same time, the ecosystem crisis demands a holistic approach, including robust conservation efforts, sustainable forestry practices, and mitigation of climate-related threats. Failure to confront these challenges head-on could exacerbate the energy crisis, pushing more households into poverty, while the looming ecosystem collapse threatens irreparable damage to the environment. This will impact air quality, water availability, and total ecological balance. Urgent action is a pressing need. This needs to also be ethical and sustainable. The Israel-Palestine war and public unrest. People in the UK are also enraged about what's happening in Gaza. Hundreds of thousands are out on the streets asking the government to call for a ceasefire. The UK has had decades of friendship with Israel and has the power to call for a ceasefire, but instead, the government has taken an openly pro-Israel stance. In the last few weeks, the city of London has seen some of its biggest protests ever recorded. People from various backgrounds gather to protest the ongoing conflict affecting Palestinians. Despite some labeling these rallies as hate marches, they are usually peaceful. Many groups have led the protest, including the Palestine Solidarity Campaign and Stop the War Coalition. They use social media to advocate for peace, even if it contradicts the government's views. Legal experts and activists collaborate to defend the right to express opinions, even when divergent from the government's stance. It reflects a clash between public sentiments and official statements. People aim to convey that discussing issues about Israel doesn't imply hostility, much less hostility towards Jewish individuals. In fact, a greater chunk of the protest body is Jewish in faith. They want the fighting to stop and for everyone to talk and find a solution. This is happening while the government keeps ignoring the people's stance, instead choosing to fund a war that it cannot afford. In the big picture, the support for peace in Gaza and the indifference from the government is telling. This is the latest event in the ongoing carelessness of the government, mainly towards its people. The bottom line: The best description of the UK's current state comes from Robert Ford. He called the country, with its bag full of issues, a wedding cake. But why? A wedding cake has layers and depth. The layers represent flavor, and depth represents consistency. In this way, the layers of this cake are the issues that it is grappling with, and the depth is how far back these issues go. It is obvious that the current state of near collapse is imminent, all because of decades of negligence and ineffective leadership. Money cuts, fewer rehabilitation resources, unreliable healthcare, and an exhausted justice system. These problems get worse as time goes on. When public workers don't get paid much, they go on strikes, which stops the economic machine in some ways. It affects the healthy regulation of a country's wealth. At the same time, the government has to divert more attention to fixing rather than improving. But in this case, the government isn't even fixing the problem. The bar is that low. Most people in the UK, about 8 out of 10, aren't happy with how the government is dealing with these problems. The Labour Party sees this as a chance to shine, and to show that the Conservative government is failing and that they can do better. Recent votes in polls, like the Ipsos Political Monitor, say Labour is leading by 20 points. This means a lot of people might want to change the leadership altogether. It is only a matter of time when there will be nothing to protect. The projections show that Great Britain is headed straight for a complete collapse. The time is now for the British government to work towards unifying the country. Do you think that the UK has a chance of survival, or is it just waiting for impending doom? Let us know in the comments section below.